You're a standout player at Washington State, where you majored in history and then played professionally in 5 countries. At what point did you decide strength and conditioning was something you may want to get into after your playing career, and why? What attracted you to this?
Well, even while I was at Washington State, even though I was majoring in history, I was always in the weight room or on the court. It's two places I just love being. So as you graduate, you finish, I start playing professionally. Don't make it to the NBA. So you're kind of in charge of your body at that point. And understand that your body is your business. What you pour into is what you're going to get out of it. I had to start investing in myself. And a part of that, I wanted to know what I was doing. I didn't want to kind of leave that to somebody else. So I wanted to know the science behind what I was doing and why I was doing it. So that kind of sparked me to say, hey, I want to get into this a little bit more. As I started to dive into it deeper, it just became a natural fit. It was like I really, really enjoyed the learning process, and I really enjoyed applying it.
Your international playing career included stops in Japan, Israel, Australia, and France. How different were the strength programs with the teams you played on overseas compared to what you were involved in at Washington State?
Washington State, I was introduced to some very good people. That really, our strength coach was good. He really kind of worked with me, helped me understand some stuff. When I had a question, he always answered it. Now you get to the professional ranks. Back then, not every team had a strength and conditioning program overseas. I think in maybe one of the countries, we may have had a guy that specifically worked with the team. That's when I was in Australia. Every other place, it was kind of up to you to take care of your body. So once again, it was, I wanted to know what I was doing. It was just reinforced in a lot of those places to say, hey, this is what I need to do and why, in order to stay, competitive and stay in shape.
So when you were playing, how much time were you? All right, you said the team in Australia had a strength program.
Mm-hmm.
How much time did you spend sort of studying what was being taught to the team with the idea that one day this is what I want to do down the road?
I started kind of looking into it, diving into it. So I would spend, a lot of my spare time just, reading up on it. Why are we doing this? Ask a question, go back, trying to, tweak it myself to see what it was, what he was really talking about. And in the midst of all that, one of the most important people I met along my journey was the strength coach for the Denver Nuggets, Steve Hess. And Steve it just blew my mind. I went to a mini camp with the Nuggets, and he just blew my mind with his knowledge and all the different things we were doing at that time. I was like, I need to know what he's talking about. He's saying this muscle, he's saying this movement, he's talking another language. And I don't like being the dummy in the room, so I'm going to go figure it out and see what he's talking about so I can actually have a conversation with this guy and, really pick up something. So, that really, those two experiences kind of helped me, push me along the path as well.
All right, you said earlier you didn't make it to the NBA. You did make it to the NBA after your playing career. You spent a year with the San Antonio Spurs on their strength and conditioning staff, and then took over as director of athletic development for the New Orleans Pelicans. The Spurs have this reputation for doing things a little differently, an unorthodox approach to some things, especially with Greg Popovich.
Mm-hmm.
Did that carry over to the strength program? Did they do anything really unusual, or is their program pretty similar to what the rest of the NBA does?
No, they try to be on the forefront of what's new. They don't want to be first all the time, but they want to be at least second or third if something's going to be innovative and it's going to help their athletes. And they had what I would consider to be my second mentor in strength and conditioning, and Mike Brungard. And Mike Brungard, in between those two philosophies, what Steve was doing and what Brungy, we called him Brungy, was doing, really kind of helped me form what I wanted to do as far as, as on the professional level, what I wanted to do with strength and conditioning. And the Spurs gave me an opportunity as a new guy, fresh into it, to really, kind of navigate and find my niche, so to speak. So I have to applaud them for taking a chance on a guy that may not have had the the strength and conditioning background as some of my peers, but they allowed me to go in there, do my thing, and eventually help lead to me getting my own position a head position with the Pelicans.
5 years in New Orleans. What led you to leave the NBA, leave New Orleans, and come to Dallas and end up at SMU?
Education. I wanted to further my education. I wanted to do something different. I feel like the industry is changing a little bit, and I wanted to go back and do something to allow me to stay at the top of the game, so to speak. So I'm going back. I'm going to get my PhD in human performance. I'm also going to work on a few other things that allow me to be more hands-on with the players, understanding some of the return-to-play protocols, and start to develop more advanced return-to-play protocols that keep the guys on the court and out of the training room.
Was it a tough sell to convince your wife to leave New Orleans and come to Dallas?
No, she had lived here previously, so she was like, Dallas is a good place. She had been here through her job, so Dallas wasn't a hard sell at all.
Did Larry Brown or Trumaine Carroll reach out to you and say we need a strength coach, or were you aware that there was an opening and reach out to SMU?
I heard there was an opening, and I reached out to them. I reached out to Coach Brown and basically said, I'm here in the Dallas area, and I'd like to be your strength coach.
When you take over a team, whether it's the Pelicans, whether it's SMU, what are the first steps you go through in assessing your players and where they are in terms of their fitness, their conditioning, their strength?
Fortunate enough here, we had Fusionetics, which is a system that kind of gives you a movement pattern screen of the guys to see where some deficiencies are within their movement patterns. With the Pelicans, I use the FMS as a functional movement screen. And it just gives me a kind of a idea of what they're capable of doing in the weight room. Once I see how they move, see what their deficiencies are, then I start to design the program around what those are so we can, obviously improve those, and then start to see where do I need to, as an individual, get this person stronger, get this person better on an individual basis.
All right, so you got here a couple months before the season started. What were your first impressions of the team that you were going to start working with?
My first impressions were I just wanted to come in and make them work a little bit. I wanted to, not that they weren't working hard. I just know, I think I had an idea of where they wanted to go. And in order for them to get to where they wanted to go, we needed to turn it up a little bit. And so my first impression was I just want to set a work standard. Here's the new standard. Here's how we're going to work. We're going to be efficient. We're going to be smart, and we're going to go. And we're going to get after it. We come in here. We're going to go. So we went.
You get hired in September, so you didn't have a full off season to work with these guys. Because of that, how limited is your program that you implemented compared to what it would be if you had a full calendar year to work with these guys?
I scaled it back, so I could just lay some foundation. That's another thing I needed to do. I just needed to start to get them to understand the languages I was going to be speaking in here. So, I take this as kind of like a foundation, period of time. So they, introduce a couple lists, introduce a couple movements, introduce my philosophy and how I feel about it, and just kind of give them a little bit. So when we do hit the ground running in the spring or in the summer, they've been at least introduced to a lot of the things I want to do, so it's not foreign to them. So now we can start to advance and add some more stuff to the table.
Conditioning in the off season and during the season are obviously pretty different, but within the season itself, from the first game to the end of the year, does your program change a lot, or is it fairly consistent maintenance of the players?
Well, it changes because once you add games, you add in a different workload. So guys need to recover. They need to understand that their bodies have to recover. How important is recovery, and that becomes a major factor in how am I planning on what we're going to do on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis. And then I have to be conscious of, obviously these kids have classes and all these other things that you don't have at the professional level. So it changes, and it can change from week to week depending on the game load. If we have 2 games that week, that's obviously going to be different if we only had 1 game that week.
In some sports, strength and conditioning programs are fairly consistent for all athletes. In others, like football, for example, they're substantially different. You're not going to have quarterbacks and offensive linemen do the same things. Mm-hmm. How different is your program for a Nick Moore, a Cedric Bearfield compared to what you do with Jordan Tolbert and Marcus Kennedy?
Well, right now the premises are going to be the same. So I wanted to establish a work ethic for these guys. So a lot of the programming is similar. So they just know they have to come in here and work. Now you have to start to, as you get an idea of what that work ethic is going to be on a day-to-day basis for them, what type of worker are they, then you're going to change that program and tailor to their specific needs. Nick Moore needs to do work more on, say, like lateral quickness and explosiveness, where you get a guy like, then you have a guy like Shake Milton, who probably needs to work on overall body strength in general. So that has to be tailored to them specifically in order to get them better, to get gains.
You talked about teaching the language that you'd be using with these guys. Is the program itself a significant change from what was here before, or is it more the terminology?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think the way I do things is obviously different. I think some of the stuff is the same as far as, they know what a squat is, they know what some of the simple movements are. I think it gets a little bit different when you start adding more complex movements, and the choices I would use for a complex movement pattern are going to be different. So I have to get them to see the sequencing, the weights, the language that changes.
When you built your program for this team, how much of it was based on what you did in New Orleans or in San Antonio, and how much of it was falling back on what worked for you as a player?
It's different. Every situation is different because you're going to have different players. In San Antonio, you have a more veteran team, so you're doing things to help maintain those guys at the end of their career, to prolong their careers, as opposed to New Orleans, where we had a mix at one point. Then we went totally young, so I had more. Basically, I had a bunch of college kids that would have big paychecks. Bodies are totally different, so their body needs were totally different. And the same is here. You may have a guy on one end of the spectrum that's a grown man, but then you have a 18, 19-year-old kid that hasn't lifted, has no weight room IQ, and you gotta, both bring them both along and service both of them. So the program it's always, I use those experiences because I've had similar athletes or similar people in similar positions. So I use some of those movements or some of those lifts from those other programs. But then it's different because you don't know the mix you're going to have.
How much do you talk to the guys about your time working with NBA teams, and how much credibility does that give you with the guys who hope to play at that level one day?
I think it gives me instant credibility. I think I don't really harp on it much because I'm here now, and I want them to know that I'm not looking past SMU, and I'm not worried about what I did. I have to come in here every day, and I have to give them the best Carlos Daniel I can give them. Carlos Daniel from the Pelicans doesn't make one of these SMU kids a better athlete. I need to be focused on what's here now and who they are if I'm going to help them really achieve where they want to go.
When a coach takes over a team, especially if it's late before the start of a season, those coaches will sometimes say that they can only implement a part of their system or a part of their playbook. Have you implemented just a part of your program that will then be ramped up after you get a full off season with these guys?
Yes. Short answer is yes.
Do they have any idea what's coming in the off season?
I think they have a little bit because I've challenged them thus far because everything we're doing is so brand new. It's a little new to them, so they know they've been challenged. I think they have a little bit of what's Carlos cooking up in that lab of his, but one thing I do know, it'll be beneficial.